Well, joining us now is Representative Khanna from California. Congressman, thank you for joining us. So just to be clear, are companies, small businesses that are backed by venture capital or private equity excluded from this program?
Well, initially they were excluded because of the affiliation rule, meaning if you had a venture capital investor in your startup, then you had to count not only the employees in your startup, but the employees of every startup that venture capitalist invested in, and that would be more than 500. Fortunately, Speaker Pelosi and I wrote to Steve Mnuchin. We called the White House. Others called him as well. And my understanding is he has made it clear that when it comes at least to the venture capital-backed startups, that he is going to waive that affiliation rule for this program. We're still waiting for the final guidance. But if that happens, the startup community would be able to apply.
So you're not accusing the White House or any of the parties here of purposefully excluding it?
No, I mean, look, this has been the rule on the books for many, many years. The problem is that in a situation like this, they needed to modernize those rules. I mean, let's be clear on who's going to get hurt. If startups don't get these loans, the venture capitalists aren't going to get hurt. They still are going to be sitting on their $100 million funds. The people who are going to lose their jobs are the administrative assistants, the engineers, everyone working for that company, many of them blue-collar workers. And then people often say, well, why can't they just go to the venture capitalist and get more money? First of all, venture capitalists aren't in a charity business, so they may not get the money. And secondly, the venture capitalists may insist on layoffs to get the money. So if we really want these startups to be able to maintain their payroll, they should be able to qualify for these loans.
Give us a sense of what you're hearing from the startups in California with the state pretty much shut down. It has been now for a while. It was one of the earlier states to do so. How much pain is there out there?
Well, it's very hard. As you know, there's already the concept of the valley of death, and that means that most startups for their first few years lose more money than they have in revenue, and that's the hardest time. Now, you add to that this hit, where a lot of startups have gotten almost no revenue the last month and don't see revenue coming in for a few months, and they're really hurting. And many of them are struggling just to maintain the employee base. We're talking about thousands of jobs. In fact, one report estimated that the total startups in this country account for 1 million jobs potentially that could be lost. And that's why they need these loans, and they need them immediately. I appreciate your previous guest as a bank getting these loans out, because the second problem is that we've got to get these loans out the door. These startup companies, this is a matter of days that they're making decisions on layoffs or not.
Yeah, we've heard all sorts of reports. Some gone smoothly, some have hiccups. Well, I wanted to ask you, Congressman, about the next potential phase of this release package. What are you hearing? How close are we? We've heard everything from infrastructure to industries like cruise ships and restaurants that need to be included. What are you fighting for?
Well, certainly infrastructure has to be part of it, and infrastructure for science and technology as well. I mean, this was a public health crisis. I wish we had invested more in going after vaccine development and invested more in the CDC, so we had testing infrastructure. I mean, the CDC is 1.5% of the amount we put in national defense. And I think most Americans realize now that we need more public health protection to keep us safe. The second thing is, look, the president talked about expanding Medicare for those who are unemployed. I would support him if he's serious about that. If people have lost their health care, there are going to be almost 30 million people unemployed temporarily for 5, 6, 10 months. Why don't we give them Medicare? That would cost less than all of the bailout we did for industry. So those are my focus. My focus is this is a public health crisis. How do we make the appropriate health investments?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like things are moving in a bipartisan way for a change, which is very good to see.
You know, that has been one thing that is true. I mean, look, this is not a crisis that's political. There are people literally dying. Mm-hmm. There are almost 40 people who've died in my district. There are over 5,000 Americans who have died. And people are hurting. They're losing their businesses that they've spent their whole lives building. They're struggling to pay rent. They're wondering how they're going to pay their bills. Politics really doesn't matter at this time. We're all Americans. We need to just come together and do what's the best we can for people.
Amen to that. Congressman, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Khanna.